Welcome back. Today we're going to be working on 8.7 day 1 notes, solving quadratic equations using the quadratic formula. Now I've talked about the quadratic formula a couple times in this chapter's videos, and today we're actually going to learn how to do it. Before we move on to the quadratic formula, let's just quickly review the methods of solving that we've learned thus far. The first method was solving by factoring. Remember, factor when we have a linear term, right? So if you notice, I have a linear term that's 8m. But if you notice, it's not equal to 0. So before we start the factor, we got to be equal to 0. And to figure out if everything ends up on the left versus the right, we look at the quadratic term. That's the term with the m squared. Since it's already positive on the left, we're going to leave it. We always want the quadratic term to be positive. So we're going to move the 4 over to the left by subtracting. And we're going to move the 8m over to the left by again subtracting. So notice all these terms on the left, 5m squared, negative 4, negative 8m, those are not like terms. So we're just going to write them in order, in standard form. So I have 5m squared, next comes minus 8m, next is negative 4, don't forget the equals, and the 0. Now, since it's ready to go, it's already equal to 0, start factoring. Always check for a DCF, but that means I can divide all three. So right off the factor, I have 5m, and everything that makes negative 4 is negative 1 and 4, negative 2 and 2. Now, since there's a 5 there, we do not know which combination right off the bat it is, so we just have our ins and outs. So I have 5m and m. Again, do not forget to drop down the equal 0. Let's try negative 2 and positive 2. Again, I don't know if that's correct, the correct order, until I check my inners and outs. My inners multiply to 2m. The outers multiply to negative 10m, which is exactly negative 8m, which is what I wanted. So I know this was the correct combination. And here, remember, we have 5m plus 2 times m minus 2 is equal to 0. So we go ahead and set both of them equal to 0. Remember, 0 product property. Two things, when we multiply two things and we equal 0, either one of them or both of them are 0. So I'm going to set 5m plus 2 is equal to 0, and m minus 2 is equal to 0. From here, I'm going to first start solving by subtracting 2. I have 5m equals negative 2. Divide both sides by 5. M equals negative 2 fifths. Here I'm just going to add 2 to both sides and equals 2. So my two solutions are negative 2 fifths, comma, and we put it in least greatest order. That's the first method of solving. Then in the last video, we practiced solving using inverses. We're going to be working on solving using inverses. Remember square roots. Remember, we looked through this. We determined we're using this method if we do not have a linear term. That's why there's x around there if you do not have a linear term. Or if you have parentheses. If you notice, we have parentheses, so I know I'm going to use square roots. So again, let's start by writing scan math. S slash A, B slash M, E, and P. The first thing we have to do is cancel everything that's being added or subtracted first. 4 is being multiplied since it's directly next to the parentheses, and 3 is being added. So let's get rid of the 3 first by subtracting. Bring down the 4, come up with x plus 3 squared is equal to 67 minus 3 is 64. So I canceled everything that's added or subtracted. From here, we're going to go ahead and cancel everything that's multiplying and dividing. Well, we know 4 is being multiplied since it's directly next to the parentheses. So get rid of the 4 by dividing. X plus 3 in parentheses drops down in the square is equal to 16. So I canceled everything that's multiplying and dividing. Now I move into all my x. Well, how do I get rid of the square? You should remember we square root both sides. Remember the square root and the 2 cancel. You just look at x 3. No, you do not need the parentheses to drop down. And don't forget, when you take the square root of 16 in your calculator, you're just going to get 4. But remember, it's the positive and negative 4. From here, you have two equations to solve. X plus 3, one of them is going to equal 4, and then the other one, x plus 3, is going to equal the negative 4. Add 3 to both sides, equal 1, and subtract 3 to both sides, x equals negative 7. So my two solutions here are negative 7 and 1. All right, let's keep moving on. Now, certain methods of solving can only be used in specific cases. For example, if there is a linear term, remember if there is a linear term, so for example, like an example 1, we're going to start solving this. And you always have to check for GCF first. Now, if there is no linear term, we're going to solve by inverses. So, now, what happens if you have a linear term, but you can't factor it? Well, that is when the quadratic formula comes to play. The quadratic formula really can be used for any quadratic equation, right? And so it can always be used when you have a linear term or you don't have a linear term. You can use the quadratic formula anytime. Now, before we use it though, you need to make sure that it's written in standard form. So the a x squared plus bx plus c. So everything has to be equal to 0. All right, and here is the quadratic formula. So x equals, this is the opposite of plus 1 minus, so that's where I'm getting my two solutions for plus or minus, the square root of b squared minus 4 times a times c. That's all divided by 2 times a. Yes, you will be given this formula on any test or quiz. Now, before we actually jump straight into the quadratic formula, let's actually learn how to simplify this first. All right, the first thing that we're going to do is simplify everything under square root. So in your calculator, you're going to start putting parentheses 5, parentheses square. Do this with me. Parentheses 5, parentheses square. Minus 4, parentheses 3, parentheses 1. Everyone should get 13. Now, did not type the square root yet. All you started was the parentheses. So we did was negative 5, so minus. Now I have over 13 divided by 2 times 3. From here, you're going to separate the two equations. You have negative 5 square root of 2 divided by 6. The other, we have negative 5 minus the square root of 13 divided by 6. Okay? You're going to put this whole thing in your calculator. Now, when we type in fractions, we have the numerator to be in parentheses. So, I'll go ahead and bring up my calculator to show you how to type this in. Okay? This out. So you're going to do parentheses negative 5 plus the square root of 13. If you have this text, you have an arrow out, parentheses, divided by, so negative 0.23 is my solution. I was going to round to 2 decimal places. Then you're going to do the same equation, except plus root 3, you're going to have minus. Now, let's say we don't want to write it again. You can arrow up, press enter, and then arrow over to a plus and turn to a minus. So my second solution is negative 1.43. So my first one ends up being negative 0.23, and this one ends up being negative 1.43. Those are my two solutions, and we're going to write them in order. Okay? All right, let's move on to the next page. Now the direction says solve the following quadratic equation using the method of your choice. So if you want to choose quadratic formula for every question, go right ahead. You don't need to, totally can. What you do need to understand is you need to, if my answer is in a fraction, I want the fractional answer. If the decimal doesn't turn into a fraction, you're around to the nearest hundredth. All right, so let's go ahead and continue with number one. The first thing, no matter what, you should still always ask yourself if you have a linear 10. And you actually have two linear 10s. I see a 7x and a negative 2x. So I'm going to go ahead and try to factor. If I can factor, awesome, because I'll be a lot quicker. If not, I'm going to go straight to the quadratic formula. So I'm going to move everything to the left side of the wall because my quadratic term is opposite. I'm going to add 2x, 4x, and on my left. I'm going to x squared plus 9x plus 16 is equal to 0. Now, if you think of everything that multiplies to 16, we have 1 and 16, 2 and 8, 4 and 4. Any of those combinations add to math? No. So this to solve this equation, I have to use the quadratic formula. Here, I'm going to first list the A is. The 8 is the number always in front of the quadratic term. So 1. B is going to be positive 9. C is 6. Now we're going to go ahead and put all of the numbers in. So again, I'm going to put the quadratic formula right here. The opposite of B plus the 9. This is the formula that you have on the front side. A squared minus 4 times A plus C all divided by 2 times A. You know where I'm substituting these numbers in. So I start by writing x equals, what's the opposite of b? B is 9, so the opposite of b is negative 9, plus or minus the square root of make it nice and long. Parentheses b squared, which is 9, minus 4. 4 is always in the formula no matter what problem you're doing, so 4 is always there. Times a, which is 1, times c, which is 16. All divided by 2 times 1. So if you remember, the first thing I do is put everything under the square root. Not the square root yet, just everything under. For negative 9 plus or minus the square root of, when I put 9 squared minus 4 times 1 times 16, I'm going to get 17. Divided by 2 times 1 is 2. Again, if you're not getting these numbers, please raise your hand and have a teacher come over. From here, we're going to separate into my two equations. I have negative 9 plus the square root of 17 divided by 2, negative 9 minus the square root of 17 divided by 2. Again, in order to do this, I need to put parentheses around the numerator. Okay. So here, I'm going to do parentheses, negative 9 plus the square root of 17, go out, parentheses, divided by 2, so that's one of my solutions. Negative 2.44, because I have to round. And then also, real quick, if you have this updated calculator, I'm going to show you an easy trick. Press the button alpha, y equals, and then enter. And you notice a fraction comes up, so then you don't need the parentheses. But if you have the older calculator, you'll still have to keep it there with the parentheses. So here I have negative 9, now minus the square root of 17. If you have the newer calculator, you just press arrow down and then 2. So my second solution is negative 6.56. I didn't need to round it. My two solutions are going to be negative 2.44 and negative 6.56. Again, we're going to write them in least to greatest order, but I'm running out of time. Okay. Let's jump down to number 4. Again, ask yourself, do you have a linear 10? And hopefully your answer yes is right there. So from here, you have to figure out get it equal to 0. Where do we want everything to end up on? Well, look at your quadratic term. It's negative. Do we want it to be negative? No. So I got to move everything to the left. Well, to move it, you're just going to add 5x. Now, I can't combine any of those three, so I'm just going to write in order. So x squared plus x plus 10 is equal to 0. Now, I don't know about you, but when I have a 5 in front or anything other than just an X and X, sometimes it's hard to find a combination that works because you have to do your inners and outers. So let's just jump straight to the quadratic formula, because quadratic formula will always work. So let's start with the numbers. It is 5 now, B is 1, and C is, again, reference the quadratic formula because that's where these numbers are going to be coming from. X equals the opposite of B, -1, plus or minus the square root of b squared, which is 1 squared. Yes, you need to have the parentheses, that's right. Minus 4 times a, which is 5, times b, which is 10. All divided by 2 times 10. Before we begin, we type everything under the square root, not typing the square root back. We're not good at it. We do parentheses 1, parentheses squared, minus 4, parentheses 4, we get negative 199. So this becomes negative 1 plus or minus the square root of negative 199 divided by 2 times 5 is 10. Are you running into a problem? Can you take the square root of a negative number? No. So if you were to type this in our calculator, if you have the shortcut alpha equals p chart, if you type in negative 1 plus square root of negative 199 divided by 10, we're given error. Error, non-real answer. So this quadratic equation has no real solution. Let's jump down to number 5. All right. Again, always look for your linear term. I'm sorry, let's do 5. And if you notice, you have a linear term. I have 3x and x. So always, no matter what, if you have a linear term, set it equal to 0. Okay, we're going to move everything to the left because we're going to move the small quadratic term. Minus x to both sides. So what do we have left? 2x squared minus 2x squared. 2x plus 1 equals 0. Now, again, I could use the quadratic formula, but let's look. Is there anything that multiplies the x to 2? Yeah, it's 1 and 1. Here, this one is x plus 1 equals 0. But again, don't forget to finish the question. You're going to set 0, again, equals 0. So we only need to solve. Now, I also see as negative 1. You don't need to put negative 1 and negative 1. It's the same thing. Negative. All right. Let's jump down to, let's do 6, and then we will call it a day. Again, always check to see if you have a linear term, and you do. But do you notice that they're the same value, 5x and 5x? So when you subtract 5x from both sides, they both go away. So do you really have a linear term anymore? No. You have the x squared is equal to 18. So if you don't have a linear term, that's bad enough. That's the method. F plus A, B plus M, E. I don't have anything being added because the 3 is plus next to the x squared. So now I have to get rid of everything that's multiplying and dividing. So how do I get rid of 3? By dividing. So with x squared is equal to 6. Now I'm going to get rid of the exponent. I'm going to get rid of the square. Remember the inverse is square rooting. Square root and the square cancel. That's equal. Now when you put the square root of 6 into your calculator, put out of that. Square root of 6 in your calculator, your calculator is only going to give you the positive 2.45 because you have to round. So I'm going to do a plus and minus. Okay. All right, please go ahead and complete 7 and 8. Pause the video. And once you finish 7 and 8, begin the homework to get a signature.